Republicans, in their failed attempt to defend Donald Trump in this impeachment investigation, argue that there cannot be a quid pro quo between Trump and the Ukrainians because the Ukrainians didn't know that Trump put a freeze on that military aid while he waited for them to do an investigation on his political opponent, Joe Biden, and his son, Hunter Biden. Now, first of all, let me just say, the notion of there can't be a quid pro quo if the Ukrainians didn't know about it is, I think, a weird defense because it admits that Donald Trump attempted to do a quid pro quo, attempted to basically freeze that military aid in order to get political dirt on his political rivals.
Can I just say, sorry, Anna, to interrupt, but there's a Republican who just made the case on TV the other day saying, yeah, no, of course, Donald Trump is too inept to have committed a quid pro quo. That was their defense. Like, well, obviously the president's an idiot. He can't carry out the simplest quid pro quo there is, which is I withhold the aid until you investigate my political opponent. But he's like, he's not even really competent enough to do that. I
mean, I agree with 50% of that statement, okay? And it's not the part that he's hoping I agree with. All right, but let me give you the latest. There is evidence to show that the Ukrainians absolutely did know that Trump was putting a freeze on that military aid in order to get a favor fulfilled. So let's quickly go to what Donald Trump is putting out there. He quoted Representative John Ratcliffe, a Republican, who made this case. Neither he, meaning Bill Taylor, who gave damning testimony against Donald Trump, or any other witness has provided testimony that the Ukrainians were aware that military aid was being withheld. You can't have a quid pro quo with no quo. All right, well, looks like there was quo. In fact, word of the aid freeze had gotten to high-level Ukrainian officials by the first week in August. Oops. This is reported by the New York Times. The Ukrainian government was aware of the freeze during most of the period in August when Trump's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, and 2 American diplomats were pressing President Vladimir Zelensky of Ukraine to make a public commitment to the investigations. Remember, they wanted the Ukrainians to publicly announce the launch of an investigation against the Bidens. The problem was not bureaucratic, the Ukrainians were told. To address it, they were advised they would reach out to Mick Mulvaney, the acting White House chief of staff, according to interviews and records, meaning, hey, why don't you have a little conversation with Mick Mulvaney about this military aid and what you need to do to get it, essentially. Now, the disclosure that the Ukrainians knew of the freeze by early August corroborates and provides additional details about a claim made by a CIA officer in the whistleblower complaint. And let me read you the relevant portion of the whistleblower complaint. The whistleblower writes, quote, as of early August, I heard from US officials that some Ukrainian officials were aware that US aid might be in jeopardy, but I do not know how or when they learned of it.
So this is what the White House says, that's hearsay. You can't confirm that. In other words, we don't think you could find the evidence that we actually did do that. Oops, we just did.
Exactly, so 2 other important details to this story. Now this is based on what members of the House heard during Bill Taylor's testimony. He actually testified that he was told it was only on the sidelines of a September 1st meeting between Zelensky and Pence in Warsaw that the Ukrainians were directly informed by Gordon Sondland, the ambassador to the EU, that the aid would be dependent on Zelensky giving Trump something he wanted, an investigation into Burisma. Zelensky, though, also said that he knew about the holdup of the military aid before his meeting in Poland on September 1st with Mr. Pence, but has been vague about exactly when he learned about it. And here's an exact quote from Zelensky himself. When I did find out, I raised it with Pence at a meeting in Warsaw. This is what he said last month, or this month.
That's not the only time he raised it. On September 5th, a bipartisan delegation goes there. Republican Ron Johnson, senator from Wisconsin, and Democrat Chris Murphy of Connecticut goes to meet with Zelensky. His very first question then was, what's going on with the aid? Like, do I have to say certain things about the politics in America in order to get the aid? And apparently both senators, to their credit, including Ron Johnson, the Republican, were like, no, don't get involved in American American politics or elections. And the aid should not be held up because of that. but it was being held up because of that. Later, the aid gets released because then the senators found out, and they're like, what the hell? We appropriated 391 million. Why aren't you giving it to the guy? So the Ukrainian leader definitely knew, and that's why he asked the US senators, what's going on here, guys? So all of this is crystal clear. You don't need a quid pro quo. You can't ask for assistance from a foreign government in your election anyway. Any other politician that isn't the president would be in a world of trouble and might literally go to prison for it. By the way, again, this goes to Democratic weakness. We're talking about impeachment, good. Finally, this is his fourth felony that is crystal clear. Finally, they spring into action. But we should also be talking about him going to prison because anybody else would. And maybe you get a deal if Trump thinks, I'm gonna go to prison. Why don't I just get the hell out of here and make a deal?
Oh, it's such a good point. That's good strategy. That's strong. But one other thing I want to note, I mean, just based on what Representative Ratcliffe said publicly already, he admitted, based on his statement on Fox and Friends, that Donald Trump attempted to dig up dirt on his political rival. He admitted it. Let me read you his statement. His statement specifically says, neither he, Taylor, or any other witness has provided testimony that the Ukrainians were aware that military aid was being withheld. You can't have a quid pro quo with no quo. So are you saying that there was there was the first part of it, the quid pro?
100%.
Yeah, that's what you're saying. So why aren't Democrats making a big stink about it? Republicans would.
Look, if you watch the Young Turks regularly, you've now heard me say this over a dozen times. Two different crimes. You cannot ask for assistance from a foreign country in your political campaign. People have gone to prison for it already, okay, in other instances. Then the quid pro quo is extortion or blackmail and misuse of your office because you're holding up American money for your personal benefit. That's a separate crime, okay? So that's the quid pro quo crime. But every Republican's all over television admitting the first crime. Democrats, why won't you say there are two different crimes? What is wrong with you? Why can't you explain to people just what I said in that last, 15, 30 seconds? It's not that hard. They should be all over television going, ladies and gentlemen, we didn't get him. The Republicans all admitted he did the first crime, let alone the fact that we have overwhelming evidence now of the second crime.
Yeah, including his own chief of staff admitting that there was quid pro quo.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.